There's stuff like bash, which is the ability to write like terminal commands and whatnot. And, the purpose of this course is not to go through every single one of the tools, because to be honest, they're always changing the tools and like the sorts of tools that we have and stuff. That's not super valuable. But it's just so that you can identify and then change on a like file or tool basis which things Claude Code has access to, so long as you're hyper specific about it, using, in this case, this little tools output. The next tab is delegate. Now, this is a coordination mode for agent team leads. Basically, the Claude Code now has that feature called the agent teams feature, where a single agent up at the top can delegate a bunch of work to a bunch of sub-agents. And so this is the permission that the agent team lead is given, which basically allows them to delegate tasks, although it's not allowed to do anything aside from just team management tools. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. Then we have bypass permissions. This is what I've been using up until now in basically all instances. Bypass permissions is great because you can do whatever the heck you want. I should note that there is obviously a risk here. There was a case a little while ago where somebody had Claude Code running on bypass permissions. And then I think it was on like a Linux computer or something, where there's a simple terminal command that you could use to basically delete everything on your computer. It's like sudo rm-rl or rf or something like that. I don't remember the exact command. I'm sure Claude would be able to tell you. And basically, because of a misinterpretation of the request, and it did a bunch of research on its own or whatever, it eventually thought it had to run this command. So it ran the command and it basically deleted all of the data on the person's hard drive. They basically had it bricked, and then they needed to take it in to fix it. I want you to know that these sorts of things are possible, of course. And I'm not a lawyer, so don't sue the hell out of me if this ends up happening to you. But it's very unlikely. In practice, this sort of thing occurs a vanishingly small percentage of the time. And nowadays, with agents getting more and more autonomy in other things, and then more and more skill and more ability to plan their own work, like we're going to talk about in a moment with plan mode, most people are shifting towards using bypass permissions. Bypass permissions also allows Claude to create new files, not just delete them. That, in addition to editing files, can present a risk. The main risk, if we're just being like business minded here, is actually you create a bunch of additional files that maybe you don't need. And, because of that, your workspace can bloat over time. So it's pragmatic and pertinent to every now and then just ask Claude Code to go through your files and see if there's anything in the workspace that just isn't required anymore. Realistically, as you guys are going to see when we build this next project, Claude's going to try a bunch of approaches to do things, both on the front end and the back end, although the back end usually much more often. And in doing so, it'll accumulate like different libraries that it probably doesn't need. It'll accumulate different files. It'll create temporary JSONs and all this fancy stuff. And as a result of that, if you're not constantly on top of that, you can have a folder that has like 10,000 files, and it's all just temp stuff, which slows down your computer and bloats Claude Code. I've done it before. So we'll talk a little bit more about context management and how to effectively do that in one of the next modules, but I just wanted you guys to know that for now. In terms of how to set up bypass permissions, it's actually non-trivial to do this. And if it's the very first time that you're setting up Claude Code, you won't have access to that. So head over to the Extensions tab, get onto Claude Code for VS Code. You're going to want to click this little gear icon and go to Settings. That's going to open up this tab over here. I'm just going to move it over to the middle so we could see. You'll notice that one of the first settings is Claude Code allow dangerously skip permissions. So it'll recommend this only for sandboxes with no internet access. Obviously, mine has internet access just fine. So, accept this at your own risk. But if you click this button, you will now have access to it down below. There's a few other settings here like Claude Code autosave, enable new conversation shortcuts, disable login prompts, and so on and so forth. I don't really use or change any of these in practice. Okay, and then finally you have plan mode, which is going to make up the bulk of what we're talking about next. Plan mode is read-only exploration, which basically means Claude Code can research things using web tools, so it can go on the internet and find things out for you. It can read through all the pre-existing files in your directory. It can also reason from first principles, and it can kind of use its own intelligence to figure things out. And then it can basically take all of this and put this into a plan document before presenting it to you. Now, plan mode is awesome, and I use plan mode all the time, and basically anytime I'm doing any sort of build that's more complicated than a simple design. The reason why it's so good is because instead of acting, which in the real world takes a lot of time and energy to both do and then undo, all plan mode does is it just researches all the factors involved in the build before doing it. If you work in this like theoretical plan space and not the actual like space of the build and all the libraries and all the code, you will save many, many hours of building over the course of just the next few days, and probably tens and hundreds of hours over the course of a lifetime of using this tool. A minute of planning saves you 10 minutes of building. It's just super high leverage, and I'd recommend it. So imagine two possible scenarios for me. In the first scenario, you build something with Claude Code. Then you test it. And then you realize that there's some issue with it. Maybe you're building a simple web app that, upon login, adds some numbers or credentials to a database. So you've done this now. You've realized that it's wrong. What that means is, because the approach is wrong, basically the time that you spent building, while not completely wasted, a big chunk of it is wasted, okay? So not only have you spent the 15 minutes to build the thing, not only have you spent the 5 minutes to test the thing, you also have to rebuild the thing, which can take 15 minutes multiplied by however many times you have to continuously test and retest. That means that the total amount of time it takes you is 35 minutes, plus a fair number of tokens, which not a lot of people talk about, but this can obviously eat into costs. That is scenario one, and this is the build without plan approach, okay? Now in scenario two, which is the build with plan, what you do is you spend your first 5 minutes just planning something super in depth with Claude Code's plan mode. Somewhere during the plan, because we're building a super granular line item scope here. We're looking at all the tools and we're looking at the objects and whatever the heck. There's a lot that's going on under the hood. Because we're doing that, Claude Code realizes that it won't work halfway through, and then just recreates a better plan that does it. The total amount of time it takes for you to get to the building is just 5 minutes plus 5 minutes, 10 minutes. And then maybe your actual build time now, because it's so much better and faster and stuff like that, is only 5 minutes or 15. So if you think about it, not only have we saved 20 minutes on a single build, we've also done so with significantly fewer tokens. What that means is it's much better to do all of your work here, basically during the planning of the spec. And this is true not only from Claude Code, but any sort of programming or really any sort of project development, as opposed to here, which is where, your machines are actually building this thing, this fantastic, amazing Lego block-based construction. I'm just going to pretend that we're building some sort of building or pyramid here, right? Because, if you screw this up, what that means is now you have to knock all these Lego blocks down and then you have to rebuild it from scratch all over again. So better to go off the blueprint or the architecture diagram or whatever and make changes there than in the physical world. The physical world incurs a fair amount of real costs. By the way, I know we're working the virtual world here, but it's the same thing as planning a construction project, right? You plan construction projects that you don't run into a situation where you don't have enough materials on site and you're like, oh my God, I got to freaking stop everything for the day and go find some. So how do you actually use plan mode in reality? Well, what I want to do next is I want to use plan mode to build out a pretty complicated project. This project is going to basically be a full stack web application. It's going to have a front end. It's going to have authentication and an interface where you can log in. And it's also going to have a back end. And we're going to build it in just a few minutes. The specific project that I'd like to build today is basically a proposal generation platform. I want to automatically be able to generate proposals, high quality sales documents that I can then send to prospects through this web interface. I want to do it all natively. And I basically want to rebuild the functionality of, DocuSign or PandaDoc. I want there to be all the bells and whistles on it. I want there to be the ability for people to sign, but also to pay. I want to have my own little login screen so that I can give it to my clients and then maybe my colleagues, and I can obviously also use it myself. I want to, have a couple of templates that I produce based off of. And basically end to end, I want to build a freaking app today. This is much more complicated than just a simple landing page, right? So how am I going to go about doing it? Well, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to build out what I'd consider to be a pretty straightforward project spec, which is just a list of things that I want this to be able to do. And there's a bunch of different formatting methodologies here and different ways of doing it. You don't really have to worry too much about that. All I'm going to do is I'm basically going to dump everything in via voice transcript to a little text tab. And then I'm going to feed that into Claude Code and have it actually format that into a specs document for me. So I'm going to open up my voice transcription tool and get after it. My goal today is to build a proposal generation platform. I want this proposal generation platform to have everything that a common tool like PandaDoc might have, insofar that I want it to be able to generate end-to-end high-quality proposals as, okay, so I just did that. I have a tremendous amount of context now. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go to a new window in Anti-Gravity. Let's just close out of the old one. I'm then going to open up a new folder. So go open folder. Then here I'm going to say new one. Let's just call this proposal generator app. Once I've created this, I'm going to dump right in. Then I'm going to go to Claude Code here. Let me zoom in so we can see this a little bit better. Down here, I'm going to go, not bypass permissions, plan mode. As you can see, I'm pretty eager. And then I'm going to go back here, copy this, and then just dump all this in. There's a fair amount of white space, so bear with me. And what I did here is I just dumped in more or less everything that I wanted to do in the app. So I didn't specify things in a technical way. I just told it what I wanted. My goal today is to build a proposal generation platform. I want this proposal generation platform to have almost everything that a common tool like PandaDoc might have, except for the template builder functionalities. I just want to give you a template and have you do it. Aside from that, I want to be able to generate end-to-end high-quality proposals as static pages that I could send the URL to the client with. And now it's going to ask me a bunch of questions about it. So what front-end framework do you want to use? I don't know, whatever's the best. So I'm just going to say this one, sure. For e-signatures, how legally robust do you need them to be? I don't know what that means. I'll just click the simplest one. For Stripe payments, will proposals have a fixed price or variable amounts you set on proposal? That's a great question. I'll say variable. Are you using Supabase for the database too? I'll say Supabase for everything. Cool. Submit answers. So what basically this just did is it crafted a little graphical user interface for me to ask me some questions about specific ways that it wants to do the project. And in this way, we can go back and forth, which is quite nice. Okay, Tailwind for utility CSS, Shad CN UI for polish. I don't know what the hell that means. Let's just click it. Can you share the proposal template now? Paste it, link it, or tell me the file path. I'll paste it next message. That sounds great. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go find a template of a proposal that I want it to automatically generate for me. Okay, so I have my proposal template over here. It's pretty sexy. You know, I give people some problem areas, some solutions. I talk about why us. I have a little photo of me, Alex Ramosi, and Sam Evans up there. So it's pretty sexy. What I'm going to do next, I'm just going to move this into my workspace, one-time project. And over here, I'm just going to rename this to call this proposal template. That's okay. And then over here, I'll say, great, it's in proposal template.pdf. And just because I also want the design to be really cool, use a simple, clean design, sort of like Apple. Follow the proposal template design in the actual generation of the page. For everything else, though, make it kind of Apple-esque. Okay, next up, it'll read through my proposal template and then think up what to do next. And now it is generating a plan for me. It's figured out the 9-page proposal document. It's designing some detailed implementation thing with all the information, the user flow, and so on and so forth. What's interesting is it's giving this to a sub-agent. You could see because it's using the task feature, which is basically coded sub-agent language. As you can see, there's a tremendous amount of information that it's going through in order to generate this. It's also doing some research, like looking up things from PandaDoc, just because I referenced it. Okay, and at the end, it's now finished the final plan file. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to scroll through and then read it for myself. It's very comprehensive. Proposal generator platform implementation plan. We're going to build a PandaDoc-like proposal generation platform for left-click. Users will sign in, create proposals via AI, and share public URLs with clients. Clients will view, sign, Canvas signature, and pay. The proposal page will follow the provided PDF template design. Also, the app is Apple-esque and minimal. Here's the tech stack. I don't know what most of that stuff means, to be honest, and I'm not going to worry about it. Proposal template sections. Cover your problem areas, your solution, why us, our team, what working with us looks like, what you're investing, contract, signature, payment. Database schema profiles. I don't know, again, what the heck this means, so I'm not going to worry about it. And then over here, we have a bunch of routes, API things, file structures. You know, as somebody that is not a developer by trade, I'm not going to focus too much on that stuff. But it looks like when people sign in, they hit login, then there'll be a dashboard page. When they create, they'll click New Proposal, which will go to dashboard/new. There'll be a few form fields to fill out, like brief description and pricing rows. They'll submit it, that'll call Opus, and then we'll generate them. And then in order to copy, we just copy this URL and send it to the client. That looks pretty clean to me. I'm sure it's not going to be perfect, but yeah, why don't we give it a go? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to auto accept. And I know just because I've done some things before with this tool stack, Supabase specifically, I'm just going to go through and I'm going to set up a Supabase account while it's running me through all of this stuff. That way I can kind of, double up on the time. While this does some work for me, I can go and do the Supabase stuff. So Supabase is a simple database, basically just handles like the logins and also handles like the generation of records and stuff. First thing that you would want to do if you were doing something similar is you just log right into Supabase, set up a new account if you don't already have one, and then start your project. I'm doing this for free, so I just started one called proposal_generator. And then I'll click on it, which will take me to the project. Somewhere on the left-hand side here, we have API keys. API keys are basically just what we want to give to this so that it just does everything for me. So let's see here. We want to give it all keys. So I'm just going to go copy API key. And then also I'm just going to, looks like it's asking me some questions here because it's now, it's still in plan mode. So keep in mind, we want to go to bypass permissions mode now, because instead of having to ask them every 5 seconds for things, I want this to be able to proceed. And then I'm just going to give it some stuff. I'll say Supabase